Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The movie podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
Welcome to this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We got a big show this week with 4 new films to review, with 3 playing in theaters, and 1 as we continue our 2024 Movie Wire cleanup leading to the Oscars. This week on the show, The Future Favors the Brave and Captain America: Brave New World. A cultural force that transcends generations and becoming Led Zeppelin. Welcome to America with 10 Oscar nominations is The Brutalist. And finally, we revisit my early review from back in November of Paddington in Peru that just released in the States just this week. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it.
Out of the windows to watch, a roar and a burst of flame. The Movie Wire podcast. You need people like me.
The Wire.
And here we go.
Now, before we get into the review, of course, this will be the same routine. This will be a spoiler-free review.
When Captain America throws his mighty shield, all those who chose to oppose his shield must yield. Taking led to a fight, and a duel is due, and the red and the white and the blue will come through when Captain America throws his mighty shield.
Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, finds himself in the middle of an international incident and must discover the motive behind a villainous conspiracy in Captain America: Brave New World.
You asked for me. Here I am.
You want to help me?
Is there anything you remember?
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Thaddeus Ross.
Whatever this is, Cap, be careful.
What do we know?
There were 5 shooters. This was a coordinated terrorist attack, sir.
I was a wartime general. Now I'm a wartime president. Your inner circle's been compromised. Let me fix it. Watch yourself. You're not Steve Rogers. You're right. I'm not. Wait for it. We're on the brink of war. I can't trust anyone. Nothing about this feels right.
Captain America. You ever ask yourself, who's playing who?
Someone's been pulling the strings on everything.
You're under arrest?
I don't want a variable out there that I can't control.
Stop!
Captain America, caught without his wings.
You like to play dress up and blindly execute the state's orders.
Don't say I didn't warn you.
What if this is a trap?
You don't even know what this is.
Since when were they red?
You want me? Come and get me!
Now, it's no real surprise that we are not only feeling the superhero fatigue from Disney Plus spin-offs to countless Marvel movies and phases. The evolution of the superhero genre is struggling to keep up with outdoing the last films. But let's just take a step back to basics. From Iron Man, Captain America, the first Avenger, and maybe the first two Hulk films, and Thor. These were seedlings of curiosity due to simplistic hero storytelling and memorable performances that sprouted to something that we found stake in. To each new hero that would be introduced, there was a curiosity and a mystery to what's going to happen next. This is the struggle that we have now with Marvel films, that they are struggling and they're throwing everything at the dartboard when it comes to writers to make the same appeal. And with each and every Marvel film, I usually get comments or emails about flaws in my review. But let me just say, you hardcore fans might light me up, but I'm not a hardcore fan of these comics. I'm familiar, let's say, with some of the storylines and heroes, and I can feel that Marvel is trying to go back to basic storytelling of these heroes as we introduce a new league or a new generation or a new phase, whatever it may be. As we introduce a new phase or a new era of heroes, studios have to convince a vast audience that we care about these heroes, not just fans of the comics, but fans of the films. But the problem we have is that the bar is set high and studios have too much at stake, so they throw again everything at the wall, hoping that the simplistic storytelling with about 100 writers can make something better. But the ending result we have is the more writers, the too simplistic the story is in terms of dialogue and storytelling, and bloated with an attempt to shove new characters into the simplistic storytelling that more often than not, it fails. And instead of cheers of excitement, we get shrugged shoulders leaving the theater. Being realistic, it's hard to top what was already good. And it's hard to have a continuation coincide with more simplistic storytelling when we are still trying to connect the dots to the TV and the movie timelines. The TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. should have been assigned to this formula, that it just isn't sustainable. It just doesn't work. And I wish I can give a little bit of leniency on these movies that are respectively trying to continue a franchise, but let's just call it what it is. Audiences are still going to see, but the question is for how long? Just not in the big budget eyes that studios are investing money on. We see studios pumping money not just in the storytelling or getting good writers. We're seeing the money pumped into casting familiar faces and, of course, the spectacle. We have Robert Downey Jr., who made $500,000 for the first film, Chris Hemsworth $150,000 on Thor, and even Chris Evans at $300K on the first Captain America. Now fast forward to Brave New World, where Anthony Mackie sits at a mere $10 million paycheck, and the studios are still trying to go back to simpler times of storytelling. And was it a better performance than Robert Downey? Hell no! And casting Harrison Ford in a Marvel movie couldn't have been cheap, but Brave New World is also a smaller budget than, say, the Marvels. So this was an obvious risk that studios took into account, replacing our Captain America. Now, with all that said, Captain America Brave New World actually beat out my expectations, which, to be honest, on a scale of 1 to 10, my expectations were about the, I would say, 4 mark, if I were to be generous. But I was taken by surprise that it did beat my expectation. Barely. Captain America Brave New World might not break new ground and might not make viewers excited on what's to come like Marvel movies past, but it's a simplistic popcorn movie that will entertain in the moment. And at times, it's too simplistic for its own good, where it treats its audience as simplistic, and that's through its cliched, repetitive dialogue, where it opens up a plethora of questions on why the writers didn't follow up with some obvious good ideas they teased around to really grow our characters, especially with Anthony Mackie's Captain America that really did need to grow for viewers to be bought into this new Captain America. But instead, it just assumed everybody watched the TV show, and in the movie, movie just appears linear throughout the entire film. The plot of Captain America Brave New World stars Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson / Captain America, who's invited to the White House to speak with the new President Ross, who was played previously by the late William Hurt, who sadly passed in 2022. Harrison, in my opinion, does a good job here, where his mere on-screen presence is enough of a distraction to not feel too put off about replacing Hurt. Ross plays a fine line between good versus villain, as many would see any politician nowadays, where his actions from the past and at times the present doesn't match what he says and, quote, wants to be a better man and wants to speak for the people. Ross tries to convince Captain America that it's time to reassemble the Avengers. Sam Wilson is skeptical of this due to Ross's past, but he is also skeptical of his own capabilities as a hero that we see countless times in this movie. This is one of the main ideas our army of writers miss on, is really connecting the dots of the good versus bad, versus actually connecting the dots of the internal want to do good between our two characters of Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford. These are two characters that really do have a deep internal conflict, and the two complain about it the entire time, but they never get on common ground of connection to really build that chemistry. This is a clear path to really have an audience connect with these characters, to really feel the chemistry, to really feel as individuals that these are heroes on the surface. All the movie does is hint at it, and it doesn't go any further than that. There's no clear pattern between these two characters. But again, the dialogue is so simplistic and never really lands, and this could be due to how many hands are in the cookie jar here. We have writer Rob Edwards, Malcolm Spellman, Dylan Musson, Julius Ona, and Peter Glantz, all with different contrasting projects under their belt. The whole movie felt like a consistent tug-of-war with the viewer caught in the middle, or many ideas thrown into the screenplay that the movie is just consistently spinning its tires, not going forward. This is prominent especially in our Captain America character, where it feels every 15 fucking minutes or so, Sam is questioning to a different side character that he isn't good enough. Our Sam character is a character that almost holds the movie back if you take away the action scenes. Now, personally, I have always felt that vulnerability is a true trait of a hero, to be open on doubts or flaws on oneself, because that is harder to vocalize than throwing a punch at a bad guy. But here, we get it way too much, where it feels like Captain America doesn't plan on assembling an Avengers team, but rather his own therapy group. Wilson complains to a side character that he isn't good enough. Side character says, "Yo, you got this, big guy. Cue the action scene." Wilson complains to another side character. He wish he had superpowers, then he will be good enough. Side character says, "You are good enough, big guy. Cue the action scene," and so on, so forth. This goes on to lead to just a recycled cliche speech towards the climax that feels unsatisfying both on an emotional level and even a Marvel level. It's just a shrug of the shoulders. But you walk out at least feeling entertained, at least at that moment. Sure, if you digest it and think about it, you will find more and more dislikes or holes in the film, and if we compare it to Marvel films past, this movie would be below par. But that's the danger in a successful franchise, to always have high expectations. If I were to look at it and ignore past films in the moment, I would be lying if I didn't say I enjoyed the simplistic ride at an entertainment level. But between the whining Captain America and the overly cliche dialogue kept me at an eye-roll level. Now, put the storytelling, the simplistic dialogue, the performances all aside. This is going to be one of those rarities, these rare moments that I actually give the direction a compliment alongside the CGI a compliment on the action sequences that I did find engaging and entertaining to watch, especially with some eye-catching shots from our director and writer, Julius Ona, who previously directed the overlooked film Loose, and the direct surprise release after the 2019 Super Bowl trailer, The Cloverfield Paradox. Ona does get the direction spot on with some fantastic memorable shots, also due in part to cinematographer Kramer Momentan, that stuck in my mind well after the film was done. Even though I did find it entertaining in the moment, this is a hard one to recommend, because between the overly done screenplay, the cliche dialogue that hints around something bigger and chemistry between the characters, and for Marvel fans, the sense of excitement of something bigger. Something to actually be excited for. This sets a foundation for a redemption movie to really give audiences something to look forward to, and it just doesn't get there. So right now, we have two movies that are really going to gain some traction, some excitement, to really set the tone on future Marvel movies, whether that's Fantastic Four or the Thunderbolts. After watching both of those trailers before this movie, I think Thunderbolts has a better shot at the fun factor, but I may be wrong. But given the Fantastic Four's history, I probably am not. The most frustrating thing about Brave New World is how much potential it had, with the topics that it presents, but does nothing with it. Sam Wilson as the new Captain America could have been a hero that audiences would want to root for with the obvious honorable vulnerability, but in the end is presented as a hero we just tolerate. It feels like we're watching an insecure hero that gives us nothing more of substance other than muscle and CGI fight scenes and just pure whining. And this is the brute versus vulnerability element that never coincides to truly define a hero element that we care about. I found myself caring more for the politician that states he wants to be a better man than a hero called Captain America. And that's a problem with a movie called Captain America Brave New World. When Captain America complains why he isn't good enough with no real resolve on it, while our Harrison Ford as our president states he wants to be a better man, my genuine care was rooting more for the politician. And by the end, I was hoping for a credit reading Ross will return. Captain America Brave New World will pass the time in generic hero entertainment, but nothing more, and for some, mainly Marvel fans, nothing less. And in the Marvel universe adds nothing new to the table than just stating this character still exists, and it will be in future movies. Again, Marvel has shown that it's starting to care less and less about the characters and more about the dependency of the spectacle and who's on screen, not how the director or the storytelling develops these characters. And Marvel has seen the results of this in their more recent movies, and will continue to see the results of this in more and more movies if they keep insulting the audience. But at a pure in the moment entertainment value, it wasn't bad, it wasn't good, it wasn't horrible, it wasn't fantastic. So I'm giving Captain America Brave New World 2 stars.
If he's led to a fight and a duel is due, then the red and the white and the blue will come through when Captain America throws his mighty hand.
Thanks. Paddington returns to Peru to visit his beloved Aunt Lucy, who now resides at the home for retired bears. With the Brown family now in tow, a thrilling adventure ensues when a mystery plunges them into an unexpected journey in Paddington in Peru.
Paddington in Peru!
Thank you for using Photo Me.
Oh, not at all. Thank you for having me.
Make sure your face is within the red circle.
Paddington, there's a letter from Peru.
Dear Paddington, it's your Aunt Lucy. She's gone, and we have no idea where she is.
She raised me when I was orphaned as a cub.
If you ever get lost, just roar.
I know I can find her.
It's not as if we can drop everything and fly to Peru.
To inflate your life, Jackie.
I didn't mean now, Paddington.
Welcome to Peru.
Your aunt seems to have set off into the dangerous jungle.
Aunt Lucy would never give up on me. We have to find her.
But the Amazon is quite... large.
Excuse me, sir. Is this boat for hire?
It is your lucky day.
Paddington, what are you doing in there? This family stays together. We'll find her, Paddington.
This way. Thank you. Just round this corner. Never touch this plant.
What are you, bear?
Aunt Lucy always says you can take the bear out of the jungle, but you can't take the jungle out of the bear.
That was close.
It's called a hard stare, Mr. Hunter. And it's for when people have forgotten their manners.
The charming and so polite talking bear, Paddington, is back for his third go-around. This time around, the Brown family goes on an international adventure to reunite Paddington with his Aunt Lucy, voiced by Imelda Staunton. The Brown family receives a letter from a nun working at the retired bear home in Peru that informs them that Aunt Lucy isn't doing well. She is deeply missing Paddington. After the father, Henry Brown, played by Hugh Bonneville, is challenged at work that he never takes risks, he agrees to take the family to Peru to reunite Paddington with his Aunt Lucy, only to find when they arrive that Aunt Lucy has gone missing in the jungle. This sets the Browns up on an adventure that one would think would test their relationship as a family and set up a series of new events to make us feel something new, something fresh with our Brown family, and of course our Paddington bear. As I said in the last statement, one would think the movie would set up a scenario to test the family and give us something new. But sadly, Paddington in Peru sets up a lot of intent of what we think should happen. We have Henry Brown being challenged at work with, well, just being boring, a family table with grown kids that are just in their own world with a disconnect from their parents, and Paddington and the Browns being lost in the jungle. The film was directed by music video director Dougal Wilson in his first big screen debut, and it shows! The movie's shots are that of a music video, not even capturing the true nature of what we have seen from the first two films. Even with the beautiful scenery of Peru, Wilson never takes the time to appreciate the environment in his direction. I could feel the whip being cracked over Paddington's back like a bear trainer saying, "Go, go, go." I could even sense the CGI bear asking for help when he is on screen saying, "Help me." The movie hints at something much, much bigger than what it can properly balance. It doesn't deliver what it promises from the first act of the film. Instead, the movie gives a big focus on a lot of introductions to characters the family meets along the way of their journey. It has scenes of wandering through the jungle where nothing really happens, and a conflict with a villain that seems overly slapstick and cliche, even for a kids' movie. As the Browns enter the jungle, they are introduced to a ship captain and his daughter, Hunter and Gina, played by Antonio Banderas and Carla Chus, who take the Browns to the last known whereabouts of Aunt Lucy. This is a perfect time and a perfect example of each and every moment for the Brown family to connect, and it's interrupted by more and more characters and more cliches being introduced. And given that the Hunter and Gina characters are important characters going into the movie, but every single time the Browns are given the slightest moment to connect as a family, as the movie originally promised in the first act, it's met with cliche scenario after cliche scenario, or a scene that just feels wasted. The Brown family never really connects as the movie promises from the very beginning. It solely banks on the cuteness, the sweetness of Paddington's intent. The movie's central focus on Paddington's exploration of his roots is underdeveloped and rushed. And even when it comes to Paddington's sweetness, his politeness, whatever it may be, the movie's central focus on Paddington's exploration of his roots is underdeveloped and rushed. The movie banks on just the pure sweetness of this bear to drive this movie. While we're given glimpses of Peru's stunning scenery and some fleeting moments of cultural exploration, the film misses the opportunity to truly delve into Paddington's heritage. The movie always hints at the evolution of Paddington in this movie, but it never really gets there. This could have been a rich emotional journey of self-discovery. Instead, it feels like a series of disconnected cliches that we have seen before, and it never comes together. It is an absolute shame after two other movies, this sweet bear, this well-mannered bear. Paddington's quest for answers about his family feels superficial and situational. It feels like lines are just delivered to sound sweet and cute, but we really don't get to the root of Paddington. And then the emotional payoff is safe, and it's delivered by one well-paced line by Paddington, but it leaves all the other issues safe and at the table. This is a family movie that is completely underdeveloped, including the Browns conflict. The Browns subplot is underdeveloped, and their presence in the film feels more like a cameo than a meaningful contribution. It's clear that the filmmakers were more focused on padding out the movie with distractions rather than investing time in the relationships that made Paddington's previous outing so special. Even when it comes to the father, the Henry Brown conflict, the movie sums up his resolution with one situation that again feels too safe even for a Paddington movie. And again, we go into the underdeveloped and laziness of it. The movie lacks the sense of adventure or emotional discovery that I think even kids will get a yawn at. Let's recap the review here. So far we have a lot of added conflicts in the beginning of the movie that's never addressed. We have an adventure story that's never really an adventure. Now let's talk about the antagonist. A big part of what made Paddington 2 so memorable was its well-crafted antagonist, such as the wicked Hugh Grant's eccentric villain that did a fantastic job. Paddington in Peru lacks not only a level of depth, but it lacks a level of fun factor. The villains here are one-dimensional and they're forgettable. Their motivations are thin and their presence in the story feels more like an afterthought than a meaningful obstacle for Paddington to overcome. This is one of the biggest disappointments, especially after Paddington 2, that I was a huge fan of. It was the best of the three. The villain was cartoonish, but it was also engaging. The villains of the previous films had memorable intent and fun factor, which is completely missing in this latest entry. Now that we have everything bloated in this movie in a simplistic level with no real intent of actually doing something, the film attempts an elementary twist at the end when it comes to its villains, and it does so in an unearned way, where it just gets to the point by the end of the movie that it's just really throwing darts at the board of entertainment without really organizing its thoughts. The third installment is usually a miss in most franchises, but the real tragedy of Paddington in Peru lies on its failure to capitalize on the potential of its premise. The ideas of Paddington exploring his origins and connecting with his family history is rich with an emotional possibility, especially with the Brown family, connecting with this family, taking this relationship to the next level. But the film barely scratches the surface. Instead of using Paddington's journey to explore meaningful themes such as identity, belonging, or family, the story opts for shallow diversions and comedic misadventures that don't really feel earned, nor are they entertaining, nor are they clever. There are moments where the film obviously could have more in-depth dialogue with the Brown family. We could have deep dived into the Paddington psyche. We could have found out feelings, emotions, something that really would have connected with adults and children. But it takes a lazy route. As we wander through the jungle and just lame dialogue, that's all it is wandering through the jungle for just another cliche moment that isn't interesting. This premise, this setting, would have been a fantastic opportunity to set the stage for Paddington to tell messaging in an elementary level for kids about heritage, love, family, forgiveness in a way of an adventure story. But writers Mark Burton from Madagascar, John Foster, and James Lamont are so tone-deaf when it comes to how to deliver a message, we get something that feels like it could have been done in a 30-minute Paddington TV episode that Foster and Lamont have previously written for. And maybe that's the problem, is that these writers can't get out of their 30-minute storytelling box. This missed opportunity to build on the emotional depth of Paddington, and even more so, have clearer, simplistic message for kids, is perhaps the most disappointing aspect of the film. Instead of being a heartfelt exploration of Paddington's roots, Paddington in Peru becomes another forgettable installment in a franchise that had so much more to offer. Even for an oh-so-polite bear that when he is on screen is so hard to resist in cuteness and manners, Paddington deserved so much better. Paddington in Peru fails to live up to the moral and messaging standards of the first two films. It still has some of the bear's signature charm, but it lacks the warmth, humor, and emotional depth that made Paddington's previous adventures so beloved. The plot is predictable, the humor falls flat, and the characters, including Paddington himself, feel underdeveloped. This installment feels like a missed opportunity, a hollow adventure that could have done more to explore Paddington's heritage and bring something new to the table. It's a disappointing entry that will most likely leave fans of the franchise yearning for the magic that made the first two Paddington films such adorable films, because the message was clear and the bear along with all the characters were memorable. Here we miss all the moral marks, the messaging marks, the storytelling marks, but at the same time, Paddington in Peru is an innocent enough movie, it's a safe movie, and parents will at least leave the theater with their kids with a semi-smile, but it will be soon forgotten about 2 hours after the movie plays. Paddington in Peru does open on January 17th in theaters everywhere, but given the tradition of Paddington's good manners, I will end my review with this. Paddington, I'm sorry, my dear bear, but your movie sucked. I'm giving it 2 stars.
Paddington, Paddington, Paddington Bear, Paddington, Paddington, Paddington Bear. He came from Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure to check out the reviews for movies that just became available to rent, buy, or stream now.
Now available on video cassette.
You'll need a pilot in this cliche recycled bald-headed thriller, Flight Risk, which was a risk to your wallet, so just wait for streaming, receiving 1.5 stars. Part dog, part man, all hero in Dogman that I just fucking reviewed. Maybe we need a hero to at least have family movies in theaters long enough to give kids the experience. But anyway, Dogman was a hyperactive but landed a great message for kids and adults, receiving 3 stars. Remember who you are in this follow-up to the 2019 CGI remake to The Lion King in Mufasa. That was an improvement, but still felt like a lazy storyline, like another Lion King straight-to-video release, receiving 2.5 stars. Find someone made just for you in Companion that answered all my questions if I should actually get a sex robot. And for that, I thank this movie and give it 3.5 stars. The missing half star is for pure disappointment of not convincing me to buy a sex robot. Fame makes monkeys of us all, and Better Man, and one of the most engaging and unique music biopics in recent memory, receiving 3.5 stars. When the Moon is Full, the legend comes to life in Wolfman, in a completely neutered remake, receiving 2 stars. Find the Way in Moana 2 that never really did find a way to make a memorable movie, receiving 2 stars. Sex Power, awkward looks, and more sex that plays like a sexual fantasy, but in reality made me roll over after I was done and just fall asleep, receiving 2.5 stars. Succumb to Darkness and Nosferatu that Robert Eggers flexes his muscles for a remake that was made just for him, receiving 3.5 stars. Feel It All, Speed, Power, Action, Chaos, and Sonic the Hedgehog 3 that sped its way to be the best of the franchise, receiving 3 stars. And finally, A Flood, a Cat, and a boat full of animals that team up despite their differences in one of the best animated films of the year, and now an Academy Award nominee for Best Animated Picture is Flow, that received 3.5 stars. You can check out those reviews of my previous episodes, and while you do, don't forget to hit follow or subscribe, and please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, before we get into the rest of the show, make sure you check out the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony, where Antonio and I cover some of Siskel and Ebert's most interesting, shocking, and entertaining film reviews. And we discuss if it holds up or if they got it wrong. Back to the Balcony is now available on all podcast listening platforms and YouTube right now. The link to that show will be in the description of this episode. But let's hear from Back to the Balcony now.
Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony.
I really don't do reviews, but for me it's more about like, hey everyone, these films exist.
When we go into Siskel and Ebert, we're not always going to agree with Siskel and Ebert, but, there's some aspects we may.
And I think with each episode we're going to understand these guys a lot more than we think we have in all the decades that we've been reading their stuff.
The Balcony debuts Tuesday, January 2nd on YouTube and your favorite podcasting platform. Join us.
When visionary architect and his wife flee post-war Europe in 1947 to rebuild their legacy and witness the birth of modern United States, their lives are changed forever by a mysterious wealthy client with 10 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, is The Brutalist.
There's him. He's alive. What? These are yours, yes?
Yes.
All of them?
Yes.
Tell me, why is an accomplished foreign architect shoveling coal here in Philadelphia?
I'm afraid it is not so simple.
was a war on. And yet, many of the sites of my projects had survived. My buildings were devised to endure such erosion of shoreline.
I brought you all out here to join me in looking forward toward the future.
What do you think?
It's unusual, even for you.
Your English is impressive. Perhaps you can help your husband sound less like he shined shoes for a wage. I'm sorry. Will you please pass that back?
They do not want us here.
Who do you mean?
The people here. They do not want us here.
When dogs get sick, they often bite the hand of those who fed them. Until someone mercifully puts them down.
I promise.
Now, The Brutalist is being talked about after its Golden Globe nominations and now 10 Oscar nominations. It's also being talked about because across the world is making legs fall asleep, butts get numb, refills from popcorn being filled, and for the poor souls that come see The Brutalist from the bar, not knowing it's fucking 4 hours long, you're in for a rough time at the movies. From sitting during its 3 hours and 35-minute runtime, 4 hours if you include the trailer runtime, this is a movie that of course would detract casual filmgoers from going to go see it. Now, open and honest, I'll be the first to admit it, this is one that I dragged my feet to go see just because of the runtime, and I didn't really see it until it's re-released because of the Oscars. And I'm sure many are feeling the same way because of the runtime, or it's steering them away completely from watching this film because of the runtime. I have heard many say that they will just wait until it hits streaming to watch this film. And this is where this review will be a little bit contradicting. The Brutalist is one of those movies that, at least for the first time watch, isn't meant for streaming. This is a movie that requires patience, attention for most of its runtime. It's best seen in an environment that requires you to pay attention, like a theater setting. But the big question that many are gonna have is it worth the time and money to see it in the theater? Said and done, my first thoughts are, the answer is yes, because I'm glad I saw it. Now, that doesn't mean it's a great movie in the end. Many will love it. Many will state that they love it just because they feel guilty because they spent 4 hours watching this fucking movie. But to me, it's not a great movie. It's a good movie. I'm glad I saw this movie. I think it was a good investment of time in the theater. Would I have paid attention to this if I was at home in a comfortable couch with a lot of distractions? Probably not. I wouldn't have appreciated it as much as I did in the theater, especially given the 4-hour fucking runtime if you include the intermission and previews. Yes, there is an intermission. Thank freaking God. But in the end, again, I'm glad I saw it. The movie didn't feel like I was sitting in the theater seat for 4 hours, and the intermission did help with that. Our writer-director, Brady Corbett, was smart enough to know that if he wanted full appreciation for what he was trying to do, he needed to give his audience a mental break. Because the flaw of the movie is that we do have to pay attention to how our characters interact with each other, but also the very long-winded metaphor that Corbett tries to convey to the viewer, which is my biggest criticism of the film, is that the dialogue is long-winded and to a point over-explained that I feel it could have been wrapped up and the message could have been delivered in about the 2.5 hour mark, and it would have been more enjoyable. And also, I wouldn't have been so let down by the ending of the film if I knew I sat for 2 hours or 2.5 hours versus the 4-hour runtime. The Brutalist, for its runtime, time explores hidden discrimination and ties it together in a social setting on how we act in terms of changing with the times of society. But there is so much that the movie is underexplored that the movie hints around should have been a higher talking point, which is the emotional pain from the aftermath of Nazi persecution, and even a bigger focus on capitalism. If we are going to make a movie that runs this freaking long, I would have thought that Corbett would have brought more to the table for talking points in his story, rather than just support for underwhelming, long-winded metaphor. Now, to his credit, Corbett as a writer, along co-writer Mona Fastfold, doesn't have a long list of writing credits under their belt, and this is both their biggest film to date when it comes to achievements and box office dollars. And when it comes to new writers, usually my biggest complaint is that there isn't enough substance versus situational. Here it's quite the opposite. It has more substance versus situation, but the substance is misguided and overworked. Adrian Brody plays Laszlo, a Hungarian Jewish architect who escapes the States during World War II after being forcefully separated from his wife Erzsébet, played brilliantly by Felicity Jones, during Nazi control. There he finds work at a furniture store with his cousin Attila, played by Alessandro Nivola. Fate points him to the direction of Harry, played by Joan Alwyn, who asks him to remodel his father Harrison's library. Harrison is played by Guy Pearce. This is the pivotal demonstration that displays Laszlo's talents and will lead to Laszlo picking up the big project by Harrison to execute his dream building. Now, there's no denying that both Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody give outstanding performances here, and is one of the main reasons we want to follow along with the film. But even more so, the Pearce and Brody's chemistry isn't a good chemistry, it's a curious one, and that's not a bad thing. The mystery to these two on how they interact with each other show a hidden intent, which leaves an unpredictable journey between these two that really made me want to listen to every word and watch every action they did. Now, even though I wasn't a fan of Corbett's long-winded writing here, I was impressed by his characters and the decision to shoot in 70mm film. Even at times of the motion of the camera that follows vehicles down the road did make me feel a little nauseous. But given the intimacy and social settings that we see a majority of the film, the style adds to the settings and atmospheres that I really did appreciate. I'm a bigger fan of him as a director than a writer because by the time the credits rolled, what stayed with me is his attention to detail and his character direction and his tone and atmosphere that blended with our characters' demeanor. The tone matched with the curiosity of our characters. And I have talked about this before, where the set design and the setting is almost a character in itself. Here, it works alongside our characters to heighten the uncomfortable feeling. Right from the first intriguing shots of a sideways Statue of Liberty is a shot I wish we would have seen more of to support Corbett's message. And we do see snippets of Laszlo's minimum designs, but it would have been a bigger support to the characters to see more of these designs, more of these great shots, more of these abstract shots. Brady Corbett's come a long way from playing our Peter character from 2006 Funny Games, and with the right project, I really can't wait to see what he does next. The Brutalist is a front-runner in the Academy Awards, and I can see the appeal for the Academy. But for me, I can't deliver and state the same appeal. Is it my favorite film of the year? No, but it's one where I can appreciate, and it's one that has memorable direction. But at the end of the day, after the climax, I left the theater asking, is that my reward for 4 hours? Is that all I get? But a movie shouldn't be judged by just the climax. Again, I'm glad I saw it, and there's really a lot to appreciate about the filmmaking aspect. But films like this, I compare to The English Patient, an award-winning film, but once is enough for me. It's a film I think everybody should at least experience once, and make the decision for yourself. But for me, I don't feel the need to spend another 4 hours with it. There are shots I'll take away, and there's some that will stay in my memory, but it's not enough to say I'll watch the entire movie again. I'm giving The Brutalist 3 stars. The journey of 4 members of the Stairway to Heaven rockers through the music scene of the 1960s and their meeting in the summer of 1968, culminating in the 1970s in the documentary Becoming Led Zeppelin.
I got my first drum kit when I was 10.
I was listening to rock and roll coming from America.
That's a sound I would really like to make.
John's wife used to say, don't you dare play with that planty. He's a complete disaster.
If the days are by you,
I'm going to form my own band, and I know what it is that I want to do with it.
Oh, Jimmy's forming a band. You should give him a call. So I did.
The first time we played together, you could tell it was going to be a good group.
It was an electric atmosphere, and that'd have been what I'd been waiting for.
Jimmy produced the album.
I wanted it to be something that they hadn't heard before.
The press didn't seem to like us.
It got ripped to pieces. People wouldn't even book the band.
Our manager, Peter Grant, gets a tour together in America.
We're backstage at the Fillmore, and Peter says, if you don't crack it here, it's over.
So we were going to go in there like with a hatchet. Everyone knew that was a life-changing experience.
We toured for months on end.
It was a whirlwind.
People are bashing down the doors to get him.
It's just absolutely ridiculous.
I was just out there, throwing it up in the air.
We just recorded what we liked.
It really dovetailed together.
You're going to be called Led Zeppelin.
And I thought, that's a terrible name. But I couldn't come up with a better one, so Led Zeppelin we were.
Now, I want to start the review right from the beginning that I feel the need to be open and honest. I am not a Led Zeppelin fan. I have listened to their music, but I have never sought out their music. But I am a movie guy, and I have watched countless documentaries. And just like movies, music is going to have a vast taste and opinion. Movies and music are part of our culture that tap into not just taste, but our emotional and relatable core. That's why my opinion never really matters in my critique in movies, and especially music, because everybody's a critic in their own way. But as I was watching Becoming Led Zeppelin, there was an appreciation and a relatability that I didn't see coming. Growing up, I listened to what was on the radio, which was just purely 80s music. Then I discovered a station that played the classics from 50s to 60s, and I fell in love with that music, especially with the doo-wop songs. But then I got into 5th grade and started my first instrument, which would be the trumpet. As I went through high school, I learned to appreciate the multiple tastes of music and the technical aspects of music, and I leaned into learning 2 more instruments that I still love to play, from classical jazz, contemporary blues, to marches. But the one thing we never got to play is a style that integrates multiple styles of music like Led Zeppelin does, and that is where this documentary really does nail it in the appreciation aspect of the documentary. Now, on its surface, let me be clear right from the beginning, this is a movie deemed for 2 audiences, fans and music appreciators. And our writer-director Bernard McMahon has that at top of mind, and we can tell during its runtime. And there's nothing wrong with that when it comes to a documentary to really appease fans, especially one that is released in theaters. But when it comes to me going into Becoming Led Zeppelin and buying a ticket, if it wasn't for the podcast business of reviewing movies, honestly, I probably wouldn't have gone to go see this documentary. But this is part of the show where I'm glad I'm in it, and this is where I love this part of my job, because I'm glad I went to go see it. Going into this documentary, knowing nothing about Led Zeppelin, it took a bit to have my mind and eyes adjust. McMahon's documentary starts with the intent that you already know about who Led Zeppelin is. So after numerous interviews between Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, and John Paul Jones, it was about the 30-40 minute mark is where my brain just clicked into who was who, which again could be a problem for those going into Becoming Led Zeppelin. Going in as a newcomer to Led Zeppelin and Becoming Led Zeppelin, it does take a little bit of patience to get to know who is who and fully understand what they're talking about. But once it clicks, it clicks. The biggest thing that was my biggest love for this movie, if you're not a fan, that you might find refreshing about this film, is that we take away the drama, we take away the drugs, we take away the hardships that the band faced during the era, and the style of music they presented to the public. We don't have this background noise of what happened in society during this time era. We all know, so we don't need to revisit it because it's not relevant to the music. This is where we solely focus on our band, and we solely focus focus on the technical aspects of what inspired these songs, what genres really went into creating this music. We don't get the rise and fall story. We don't get the what happened in society during this time story. We don't get societal changes during that time. We get a laser focus on the band and how not just becoming Led Zeppelin, but taking styles of music and attempting to do something new and fresh. This was refreshing to watch when it comes to a documentary, since it's so tempting for a documentarian to put in filler of society to justify the why. We don't get that here. We get exactly what music does: inspire and bring art, creativity, and emotions to the forefront. And those that are brave enough to present their inner thoughts, talents, and creativity to the forefront. McMahon does a fantastic job on the balance of taking the birth and origin of Led Zeppelin's technical aspects of genres and introducing the origins to the innovative technical style at the time that they introduced to the world. In a selfish, non-fanboy way, I wanted more of this. The beginning of becoming Led Zeppelin, we are introduced to the blues artist, swing artist, rock and roll artist, and even a brief snippet of the big band audio of Sing, Sing, Sing. These are fantastic examples of how music inspires, and not just inspires us on an emotional level, but inspired a band to do something innovative with their way of music, including old footage of Little Richard on the piano that I really did enjoy. And these little clips really did help me buy into this story of Led Zeppelin and make me, as a non-fanboy, engaged and respect the origin story, the inspirations to their style and songs. This is the most intriguing thing about becoming Zeppelin, is how we take songs that inspired us to evolve the way of music. It paints a perfect picture of innovation to movie music alongside the evolution of our society. Now again, this is what I really did respect and love about this movie. We never get tempted on what the public thought about Led Zeppelin. We don't get the rock and roll as a devil. We don't get any of that here. We get a laser focus on the origin, the growth, the innovation of what became of Led Zeppelin and why it became the band that it did. We get the music examples that led to the style of music that they became. And I appreciated that, to have a music documentary really just ignore the background noise of society and focus on the music. Now, the film doesn't completely ignore this aspect. We do get visuals of it. There is a scene in the film that I found contradicting but yet interesting. That music introduced to our youth plays a big impact on their taste of music and the emotional reaction of them growing up. Believe it or not, music and movies play a big part of us growing up and our youth. And we have this scene of young Led Zeppelin perform where we have neutral looks of adults and the little kids covering their ears. But it begs a question that I would have found more interesting, but it can't be with this movie, is the result of 10 to 20 years later of how this introduction to the new heavy blues affected their taste. This would be another interesting documentary of how music grows us, because I can almost bet that the experience these kids had, even though covering their ears, they ended up growing to love or even just merely respect this type of music. Now, obviously, there's no way to measure this, but this would have been an interesting premise for another documentary, and the fact this documentary made me wonder about this thesis is a kid introduced to music like Led Zeppelin at a young age, even though ears covered, did it affect the music they listened to later in life? Did it inspire them? I know the answer to it because the answer is probably going to be yes, but again, that's for a different documentary. The premise from the beginning of becoming Led Zeppelin hints around the inspiration of their music, and though maybe not intentional by McMahon, it did raise an eyebrow of intrigue. During the first half of the documentary, as a newbie to Led Zeppelin, between figuring out who's who and as we're introduced to more of the origin of the songwriting and the style, these are the most curious, engaging, and entertaining pieces of this documentary. But as McMahon leans into the second half, my mind started to wander around the previous curiosities, once the movie focused more and more on the growth of the band and their success. For fans, the movie no doubt will entertain from start to finish. For appreciators of the art, may find more value in the first half. And for those just being introduced to the band The Art, will still find value in the first half, but yet will be inspired by the outcome of change during the second half. By the end of becoming Led Zeppelin, there is no doubt this was a tribute documentary and a thank you to fans of not just the band, but their art, and salute to the culture of change and inspiration to craft new ideologies, messaging, and push the evolution of music forward. Even though it didn't make me a fan of Led Zeppelin, it did give me a new respect for the bravery to challenge and integrate styles of music to not just move forward, but also hold tribute to music past. After the movie was done, I did turn on Led Zeppelin and I listened for a good 2 hours. And even though still not a fanboy, I have a respect for him. I listened to something new that I didn't listen before. I listened to the chords, the notes, and the lyrics to see a true hard blues feeling, a new appreciation for what they actually did. So even though I'm still not going to seek them out, there's a level of respect for what they did. And there are some music chords that will stick in my mind of just remembrance from this film and the music I listened to after. And the most important thing to a documentary is a couple things I've always said. 1, does it entertain? Or 2, does it teach? Or 3, does it inspire? This one inspired me to seek out the information after. And that's a true success of a really good documentarian. And I say bravo to McMahon. Even though I was skeptical going into this movie, especially within the first 30-40 minutes, I was glad I saw this movie. Becoming Led Zeppelin at a surface level is a fan film, but beneath this fan film is something much deeper that you don't have to be a fan to respect. Our writer and director, Bernard McMahon, and our co-writer, Alison McGordy, made something special here that makes you look below that surface level. I'm giving Becoming Led Zeppelin 3.5 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you haven't yet checked out the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony, make sure you do. Again, the link of that show will be in the description of this episode. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film and support your local movie theaters.
Thank you for bringing me to the movies.
Let the credits roll. We say farewell. Join us next time. We'll have more tales to tell.